There's a Boy in the Girls' Bathroom, Chapter 28. Bradley lay on his bed, on his stomach. He chewed the end of his pencil as he looked hopelessly at the arithmetic book open in front of him. Next to the book was a piece of paper. In the upper right-hand corner, he had written, Bradley Chalker's homework, arithmetic, page 43, Red Hill School, room 12, Mrs. Ebble's class, last seat, last row, black eye. His handwriting, which was messy anyhow, was made worse by the fact that he wrote with a dull pencil on the top of a soft bed. He had stayed in Mrs. Ebble's class as long as he could after the bell rang. Bradley, it's time to go home, Mrs. Ebble finally said to him. He looked outside, unsure if Jeff and his gang of bullies were waiting for him. I have a question, he said. Mrs. Ebble eyed him suspiciously. What kind of question? He tried to figure out what kind of question he had. An asking question. I see, said Mrs. Ebble. May I ask it? He asked. Okay, she said reluctantly. He asked his question. What page is the homework on? The homework? Page 43. He wrote 43 on the top of his sneaker so he wouldn't forget. Then he took his arithmetic book and stepped outside. Jeff and his friends were playing basketball. He ran home. Now he looked hopelessly at page 43, shook his head and sighed. Question 1. What is 3/4 of 2/3? It was the most impossible question he'd ever seen. His mind wandered. Hey, Bradley, what are you doing? Asked Ronnie. Homework. What's homework? She asked. It's work you do at home. Is that supposed to be funny? She asked. No, really, that's what they do at school. They give you work to do at home and they call it homework. You've never done it before, said Ronnie. I'm doing it for Carla. Now leave me alone so I can concentrate. Question 1. What is 3/4 of 2/3? Why are you doing it for Carla? Ronnie asked. He sighed. Okay, I'll tell you. But you can't tell anyone. Ronnie promised not to tell. We're in love. Really? Exclaimed Ronnie. How do you know? She kissed me. Oh, that means she loves you, said Ronnie. Are you going to marry her? Maybe when I'm older. First, I have to do my homework. I'm going to marry Bartholomew, said Ronnie. I know, said Bradley. Now let me do my homework. Question 1. What is 3/4 of 2/3? Hey, Bradley, what's going on? Asked Bartholomew. Leave him alone, said Ronnie. He's trying to do his homework. He can't concentrate when you're talking to him. Maybe I can help, said Bartholomew. What's the problem? What is 3/4 of 2/3? Bradley asked. 3/4 of 2/3, Bartholomew repeated. That's a tough problem, all right. 3/4 of 2/3. Let's see, you divide 4 into, no, you multiply 2 times, no. Of means divide, said the donkey. Like if you take half of something, it means you divide by 2, you divide by 3, by 2, and 4 by 3. Bradley started to write it down. No, of means times, said the lion. You have to multiply everything. First, you have to reverse the denominators, said the fox. You don't reverse, you inverse, corrected the mother cocker spaniel. I think you have to find a common denominator, said the elephant. Not for multiplication, said the hippopotamus. That's only for addition. Multiplication is the same thing as addition, said the fox, only faster. You cancel out the 3's, said the kangaroo. You always cancel out 3's. You multiply the 3's, said the lion. Bradley kept erasing and rewriting and erasing and rewriting until there's nothing but a big black smudge covering the paper. On top of the smudge, he tried to write 3 times 3 equals 9, but as he did so, his pencil tore a hole through the paper. The answer can't be 9, said Ronnie. If you start out with fractions, you have to end up with fractions. Bradley slammed the book shut. None of you know what you're talking about, he cried in disgust. He took the book, paper, and pencil and walked down the hall to the dining room. His mother was sitting at the table working a crossword puzzle from the newspaper. He plopped down next to her and sighed. She looked at him inquisitively. I can't figure out my homework, he complained. Will you help me? His mother smiled. I'd be delighted. Let me see. He pushed his arithmetic book in front of her. Page 43. She opened the book to that page and looked at Bradley's torn, smudged paper. Okay, first, let me clear away this newspaper so we can have a nice, neat place to work. While I do that, I want you to get a clean sheet of paper. I don't have any more paper. This is all I brought home. There's some in your father's desk. Get a sharp pencil, too. He looked at her in disbelief. He wasn't allowed to touch anything on his father's desk. She nodded. Bradley felt a little scared as he walked into the extra bedroom, which his father used as an office. He opened the top drawer of the old oak desk and carefully took out a pencil and piece of paper. He shut the drawer, looked around, and hurried back to his mother. She smiled at him. He sat down and wrote, much neater this time. Bradley Chalkers, homework, arithmetic, page 43, Red Hill School, room 12, Mrs. Ebel's class, last seat, last row, black eye. You have to put all that, he explained, in case it gets lost. She read the first question aloud. What is 3/4 of 2/3? He shrugged. Okay, the first thing you need to do is write the equation. He still didn't know what to do. She wrote it for him. 3/4 times 2/3 equals. Whenever you see the word of, it means you multiply, she explained. Of means times, he said. Right, said his mother. That's what the lion had said. Now you cancel out the 3s, said his mother. That's what the kangaroo had said. You always cancel out the 3s. Neither of them noticed that Claudia was standing behind them watching. That's not how you're supposed to learn it, she said abruptly. Bradley turned around and glared at her. You have to explain why you cancel them, said Claudia. And they don't call it canceling. It's called dividing by 1. I just know the way I learned it, said Mrs. Chalkers. If you want, I can show Bradley, said Claudia. He looked at his mother, then back at Claudia, then at his mother. She knows the way. They're teaching it now, said his mother. You'll help me? Bradley asked his sister. Sure, why not? I got nothing better to do. Mrs. Chalker stood up and Claudia took her place. Don't do it for him, said Bradley's mother. Make sure he knows how to do it himself. Claudia worked patiently with Bradley for the rest of the afternoon. When he said he understood something, she made him explain it to her. That was harder. He understood it when she did it, but then he had trouble when he tried to do it himself. By dinner time, they were only a little more than halfway through. Bradley wanted Claudia to help him after dinner, too, but she had her own homework to do. You know how to do it, she told him. You can do it yourself. I need help, he complained. I'll help you, said his father. You will? Let's go to my office. We can work at my desk. Bradley couldn't believe it. They worked together. Bradley was surprised by how much his father knew. He made all the hard parts seem easy. Bradley was a little disappointed by how quickly they finished. He liked working with his father. He brought his finished homework back to his room. Oh, I get it, Bradley, said Bartholomew. You multiply the numerators and denominators separately. But I still don't understand reducing. It's easy, said Bradley. Here, let me show you again. Chapter 29. Bradley was too excited to sleep. Mrs. Ebel will be so surprised, he thought. She'll tell the whole class. Only one person got 100%. Bradley. There were so many things that could still go wrong. What if I lose it on the way to school? He worried. What if Jeff and his friends steal it? Twice during the night, he got out of bed to make sure it was safely folded inside his arithmetic book. What if I did the wrong page? He was no longer sure whether Mrs. Ebel had said page 43 or page 62. He tried to remember exactly what she said to him. He sat up in horror. She never said it was arithmetic homework. Mrs. Ebel had just said a page number. She never said what book. She could have meant his history or language or any of his other books. He lay back down and trembled. His tears wet his pillow. He got out of bed early in the morning, checked to see if his homework was still there, then quickly got ready and left for school without eating breakfast. On the way, he stopped to make sure he still had his homework. As he opened his book, the paper fell onto the sidewalk right next to a puddle of water. He stared at it, horrified by what he almost had done. Then he quickly picked it up and placed it back in his book. He held the book tightly shut the rest of the way to school. He was one of the first ones there. He had to wait for the front doors to open. He kept a lookout for Jeff and his gang. He stood with his back to the school wall so they couldn't sneak up behind him. He saw Andy. He thought Andy had seen him too, but if he had, he didn't do anything about it. When the doors opened, he was the first one in Mrs. Ebel's class. He sat at his desk, last seat, last row, and waited. As the other kids came in, he saw them putting sheets of paper on Mrs. Ebel's desk. He wondered if that was their homework. And now he had a new worry. He didn't know how he was supposed to turn in his homework. Jeff entered, placed a piece of paper on the pile on top of Miss Ebel's desk, then came toward the back of the room. It must be his homework, thought Bradley. What else could it be? Shawnee, he said aloud. The girl who sat in front of Jeff turned around. Are you supposed to put your homework on Mrs. Ebel's desk? Don't tell me what to do, Bradley, Shawnee snapped. You worry about your homework and I'll worry about mine, okay? She turned back around. It was almost time for school to start. What if I have to put it on her desk before the bell rings, or it doesn't count? He fumbled through his book for his homework, stood up, then headed for Mrs. Ebel's desk. He became more nervous with each step he took. His mouth was dry, and he had trouble breathing. He could hardly see where he was going. He felt like he was going to faint. Mrs. Ebel's desk seemed so far away. It was like he was looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope. His heart pounded and his homework rattled in his hand. Somehow he made it to her desk and tried to focus on sheets of paper the other kids had put there. It looked like arithmetic, page 43. But instead of feeling better, he felt worse, like he was going to explode. Do you want something, Bradley? Asked Mrs. Ebel. He looked at his homework, shaking his head. Then he tore it in half and dropped it in the waste paper basket next to Miss Ebel's desk. He instantly felt better. His head had cleared and his breathing returned to normal. His heart stopped pounding. He walked back to his desk, took a deep breath, exhaled, and sat down. He folded his arms on the desktop and laid his head down sideways across them. He felt sad, but relieved as he gazed at the gold stars. Chapter 30. Bradley remained in his seat after everyone else had gone out to recess. He walked to Miss Ebel's desk. She was sorting papers. Mrs. Ebel, he said timidly, may I use the hall pass? I have to see the counselor. She looked up. Please. Normally, Mrs. Ebel would never allow Bradley Chalkers loose in the halls, but something about the way he asked must have changed her mind. All right, Bradley, she said, then caught herself. But if you're bad, you'll never be allowed in the halls of the school again. Thank you. He took the hall pass off the hook behind her desk and headed out the door. You're welcome, Miss Ebel said to herself. He knocked on Carla's office. How nice to see you today, Bradley, she greeted him. I appreciate you coming to see me. He shook her hand, then they sat around the round table. She was wearing the shirt with the squiggles on it. It was the one she wore the first time he saw her. He liked it, but not as much as the one with the mice. I did my homework last night, he said. Carla beamed. I'm so proud of... I ripped it up. What? I ripped it up. I brought it to school, and I was just about to put it on Mrs. Ebel's desk. Then I ripped it up. Why did... Carla started to ask. Why did I rip it up? He asked her first. I don't know. Why did you? He shrugged. She shrugged. They both giggled. I was afraid you'd be mad, Bradley said when he stopped giggling. Carla shook her head. You did your homework. That's the important thing. I'm so proud of you, Bradley Chalkers. I'm going to do my homework from now on, he promised. That's wonderful. But what if I keep ripping it up? He asked. Why would you want to do that? I don't know. I didn't think I wanted to rip it up today. The main thing is that you did it, and you learned some things by doing it, didn't you? What of means, said Bradley. What of means? Carla repeated. Times, said Bradley. She stared at him, baffled. Oh, right, she said as it suddenly connected for her. Okay, so even though you ripped up your homework, you still remember what you learned. You didn't rip up your memory. And when Mrs. Ebel gives the next arithmetic lesson, you'll know the answers to the questions. If they don't change the rules, said Bradley. What rules? Like, what if they decide to make of mean subtraction? They won't change the rules, Carla assured him, whoever they are. But what if I rip up my test too? He asked. Carla looked at him as if he was being silly. Has Mrs. Ebel given you any homework for tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow's Saturday. Okay, for Monday. No, we never have homework over the weekend. He spoke like an expert, like he'd been doing homework for years. But we have a book report due next week. Only what? I don't have a book, and Mrs. Wilcott won't let me check one out from the library. Well, let's see, said Carla. Do you think you might know somebody else who might let you borrow a book? Think hard now. Bradley looked around at all the books in her office. May I borrow one of yours? He asked. Please, I won't scribble in it. Carla walked around the table and then picked out a book from the stack on top of one of her bookcases. It's my favorite, she said as she gave it to Bradley. He read the title and laughed. My Parents Didn't Steal an Elephant by Uriah C. Lasso. He opened to page 1 and read the first sentence. I hate tomato juice. He thought that was a funny sentence to start a book. He continued reading. Every morning, Aunt Ruth gives me a glass of tomato juice, and every morning I tell her I hate it. Fine dumpling, she says. Don't drink it. She calls me dumpling. Uncle Boris calls me cornflake. They're crazy. One of these days, I'm afraid they're going to try to eat me. He glanced up at Carla and then returned to the book. My parents are in jail. They got arrested for stealing an elephant from a circus. Only they didn't do it. If they stole an elephant, I'd know, wouldn't I? I mean, if your parents stole an elephant, don't you think you'd know about it? I think the elephant just ran away. Her master was always mean to her. He whipped her and made her do stupid tricks. My parents used to complain about that a lot. That's why everyone thinks they stole her. So anyway, that's why I have to live with my crazy Aunt Ruth and Uncle Boris. If you ask me, they belong in the circus. They're crazy. Uncle Boris always smokes a cigar. It just hangs out of the corner of his mouth. Whenever he kisses my aunt, he swings the cigar out of the way with his tongue, kisses her on the side of the mouth. I bet you think Aunt Ruth doesn't like it when he kisses her that way. Wrong. She always laughs when he does it. Sometimes he smokes a cigar too. I told you they were crazy. Look, he even drinks a cigar while he's drinking tomato juice. The bell rang. Bradley was amazed by how quickly the time had passed. Do you want to have lunch together again? He asked. I'm sorry. I'm having lunch with the president of the school board, said Carla. I'd much rather eat lunch with you. He didn't mind too much. At least he had her book to read. They shook hands and he walked back to class. He placed the hall pass on the hook and took his seat. He knew he'd write a good book report because he had such a good book to read. I just hope I don't rip it up.